Growing up as a Mega Man fan, there were a lot of classic Mega Man fan games, but almost nothing for Mega Man X. Recently, that's begun to change. We've had remakes and demakes in the form of Mega Man X8 16-bit and Mega Man D Extreme. I love a good fan-made remake, I've even got a video on one, but I've always had a craving to see an original X fan game. A game with a unique set of Mavericks, stages, armor upgrades, the works. Well, after years, we finally have that. This is Mega Man X Regenesis, a completely original Mega Man X fan game. Mega Man X Regenesis takes place in an alternative timeline where X died at the end of the first game. Sigma won and took over the world. But Dr. Kane had a backup plan. A program to rebuild X by transferring his conscience to a new body. The intro level opens up with an attack that forces X to awaken, and as we go further, we see a decaying Central Highway. Central Highway in X1 is already meant to be sort of a ruined society, so seeing it ruined even further emphasizes the bleak state of the world. X eventually runs into Vile, and after a fight, Vile tells him the truth. The Regenesis project to rebuild X took decades, and X awoke to a time with almost no humans. Story-wise, Regenesis features almost no returning characters. As Vile reveals, there is no Zero. He's dead. There is a mysterious person X communicates with throughout the game, but that's it. X is on his own. X is distraught, but the communicator tells him not to give in to Vile's words. There are still some humans left, and they need help, and X will always help the innocent. Despite the dark premise, Regenesis does not get caught up in post-apocalyptic melodrama. The story is used as a way to isolate X from help, but also to emphasize his ideals. When you fight a Maverick, X speaks to them like in the PlayStation games. We get to learn their personalities. Rail Raccoon, for example, is trying to make ends meet. He doesn't actively crave the destruction of humans, but he also doesn't really care, as long as he gets his money. These combos are quick, and don't get in the way of gameplay, and yet they add quite a bit of flavor. A lot of these feel like philosophical debates, and my favorite might be with Tundrian Bear. Before each level, we learn why we need to save it. Tundrian Bear is attacking a former human research facility. The data may be crucial to learning where the remaining humans are, and X vows to keep it safe. When X reaches Tundrian Bear, Tundrian talks about wishing the ruins to stay silent. Tundrian Bear thinks the data needs to be destroyed. Scientific progress has always brought war and suffering. But X reasons that the technology itself wasn't to blame, the people were. And Tundrian actually concedes a bit. Maybe that's true. But someone will always make the wrong choice. X believes that we, the humans, can learn from our past mistakes. Tundrian admires that belief, but does not share it. When X talks to a Maverick in this game, he can never prevent a fight. But through his words, we see his convictions even in a hopeless world. Quite a few Mavericks even respect his ideals. There's not much story, but there's just enough to make this rebuilt X compelling. Story-wise, I think Regenesis nails it. Graphically, this game is based on the SNES era. The tile sets look nice, and the Maverick designs are especially cool. I do wish there was a bit more enemy variety. Maybe some palette swaps to keep stages feeling fresh. There's quite a bit of green guys, but that's a nitpick. What I really appreciated is how this game went beyond its 16-bit roots. Widescreen is of course a huge gain, and allows you to see more of the field, but the main graphical focus I'd say is on the way the game uses dynamic lighting. Weapons can light up dark rooms, and sometimes enemies are the only source of light. You can see the lights of bullets reflecting off of walls. It is used both in gameplay and to add a subtle visual identity. If I see a screenshot because of the lighting, I know it's Regenesis. And then the music. Mega Man X is a lofty legacy to live up to, and I think this game succeeds. There's a lot of rocking tunes, with my favorite probably being the second Fortress theme. But okay, presentation and story do matter for X, but what about that gameplay? Now, The intro stage is pretty stellar, as I've gone over. But after that, I'll admit, things are pretty brutal. Before you find any upgrades, Regenesis is quite hard. You've got to get used to the dash jumps and timing, and you'll find a lot more floating platforming than other X games. I chose the sky level as my first choice, and that was probably the wrong choice. A lot of vertical platforms, enemies that take a bit to defeat, it was brutal. And the icing on the cake is I found my first capsule. Finally, I would get a break. But then... 15 chips? You see, Regenesis features these upgrade chips scattered around all the levels. When you find a capsule, you need to spend 15 chips to use the armor. Later on, this is no big deal, but early on in starting, that was a bit disappointing. I died, and so I tried another stage. I got more of those chips, but also died. I played on normal mode, but it was still pretty hard getting my bearings. But I started getting used to things. I failed another stage, but did find a heart container along the way. And then I went back to the win stage to get the capsule with my newly found chip stash. And this is where the game really clicked. You get an upwards uppercut from the capsule, which seems underwhelming at first. I wanted a power boost. But it's not really meant for offense. This is like a makeshift double jump, and all of a sudden, the floating platforming made a lot more sense. With this upgrade, I was able to find new areas and open up exploring in other places. I found a sub-tank in a stage with the double jump. In the same win stage, which I left for later, I was able to use a shortcut with the double jump. That made me realize that this game had paths both for speedrunning and to mitigate backtracking for upgrades later. When I went to Rail Raccoon stage, I was finally ready. While the other stages I'd played were quite heavy on platforming, this one was a nice change of pace. A fast-paced dash through a runaway train where you get to pilot some ride armor? Now that's a stage. It was a lot of fun, and it was topped off with a great fight. The Maverick fights in Regenesis are very well designed. You can pick up on patterns and adapt, but if you make mistakes, you'll lose. Rail Raccoon's fight features fire, giant jumps, and vertical trash heaps. Well-timed dashes and jumps are enough, and I eventually defeated him, which earned my first special weapon, the Jolt Seeker. In most Mega Man X games, I don't really use the special weapon since the Buster often ends up overshadowing them. I'm very happy to say that Regenesis has an excellent special weapon roster. Jolt Seeker was by far my most used special weapon, and its homing property made the floating platforming a lot easier. But I found uses for the others too. Sand Spreader deals a ton of damage at short range, and can help with sections that require dashing close to enemies. Flare Burst has a long delay, but its power was good for more distance-based combat. There are a lot of places where they outshine the Buster, and yet the game still works if you want to only use the Buster. It's a nice balance. With more upgrades and weapons, the game really opens up. I started to appreciate the unique levels more. The crushing chase of Arsene Vulpine contrasted with its use of the classic disappearing blocks, though these were more telegraphed. Hydro Axolotl made use of the aforementioned dramatic lighting, where you have to carefully weave your way through the dark, with your foes, the light-up jellyfish robots, helping you find your bearings. There's a good variety of stage gimmicks, and every stage also has a major difference from standard X. During my run through Arsene Vulcan's stage, I found my second piece of armor. When I got my upgrade, I was surprised to see another Buster enhancement. And that's when it hit me. Regenesis has a lot of upgrades, and this isn't different sets of armor. This is one core upgrade set, with a capsule in each level. The upgrade chips that previously gated me out of my first armor suddenly made sense. If there's 8 upgrades and each one costs 15 chips, then I needed to keep collecting chips. The chips serve to create more engaging level design. Mega Man games often gate off optional challenges with a power-up. You might not always need a health pickup in a Mega Man game, but an upgrade chip in this game? Yeah, I'll probably need it. And unless you go for the secret upgrade, you don't need to get every single chip. With so many upgrades, the game is able to dish out movement enhancements at a good pace. I already had the double jump shot, but then I got a traditional double jump too. Now I can essentially triple jump through areas? Forget it. The movement opening up was a ton of fun, and I didn't even get my air dash until way later in the game. The movement lets you blitz through stages if you wish, but the stages are still perfectly doable with your base kit, an impressive accomplishment. Exploring for upgrades was quite enjoyable. I mentioned the double jump sub-tank I got before. There's quite a few of these that require out-of-the-box thinking, or finding the right special weapon in the right environment. Not all of these are winners, and quite a few remain hidden for me during my run, but even a sub-take and hard take down, I was still well equipped for the final boss. I'm excited to try to find upgrades in new playthroughs. With the chips and the different modules, routing out what to get first and where is an exciting prospect. The upgrades help you through the unique slated levels. Whether it be a swamp with a Kamehameha Snapper and insta-kill spiders, or a desert with a sudden sand flood, you'll be able to take them on. In Regenesis, you've got a mix of fast-paced levels built around your base movement, and seemingly slow-placed ones with a lot of platforming. But by making use of your upgrades, you can speed through. There's those shortcuts I mentioned earlier, but sometimes better movement can be enough on its own. The upgrades also help with boss fights. Save for one tricky guy, I primarily used the Buster at least once against all the bosses, because it was fun. With the movement upgrades, the bosses can have vertical attacks with less waiting periods, and more leeway to make mistakes. Even though Arson Volpine has intimidating lava, it still felt fair because of my safety nets. I was also more than ready for the wind of Skyblade Squirrel, thanks to all of the air utility. But they don't make the boss fights free either. I still had to weave through bullets, dodge the giant lasers, and avoid the big bodies of Mavericks. I don't think there was a single boss fight in this game I disliked, save for one minor thing I'll get to later. So, the main stages, upgrades, and boss fights all combine into a great experience. But as Mega Man fans know, things can fall apart in the endgame. And thankfully, Regenesis provides a good, albeit not perfect, endgame. I really like the first section of this fortress. There's all these moving platforms to bring you up, but if you utilize some of your movement upgrades, you can speed through faster. A lot of the fortress overall is like this, to the point that I actually purposefully didn't use upgrades at some parts to see if it was still enjoyable without them. And yeah, the dash jumps are trickier, but still doable. The fortress is not overly hard or punishing unlike a certain game, but still allows you to use all your skills. But the pacing does get interrupted due to the boss refights. I mentioned how I like the second fortress theme, but you barely get to hear it as you have to refight 3 Mavericks in one stage, each one interrupting the music, so that's a shame. The stage sections between them are good, but quite short. But my biggest complaints were 2 softlocks I ran into during boss fights. I fell into 2 bits and had no way to progress, not even a death. So I had to restart the levels. This only happened to me twice, but they both happened quite far into the levels. It felt like this part of the game had less polish than what came before, which I get. Like, this was made by people in their free time for 2 years. I understand wanting to get the game out. I just hope that now it's out, we can get these fixed. But after a satisfying fight with Vile, we get to the final boss. Skip here if you want to avoid spoilers. I was able to get through it in one try. The twin dogs were tricky, but I got some nice offensive utility out of my uppercut. Sigma himself had a ton of attacks and a lot of health, but with some dodging and a lot of special weapons, he went down. And then his final phase was a Mega Man 3 reference of all things. Okay, this fight did make me use all my sub-tanks, as avoiding the lasers on the hands and all the enemies was quite tricky, but still doable. But with one final strike, Sigma was down. There was the traditional ending text scroll, and that ended my first run of Mega Man X Regenesis. This is one of the first original Mega Man X fan games, and while there are a few issues, overall, I think Mega Man X Regenesis knocked it out of the park. There's just enough story to endear you to this version of X, and solid presentation backs fun gameplay design. The upgrade game makes it feel different from the X games that came before, and its emphasis on movement makes traversing the levels and fighting the bosses a treat. I would say that the quality of Regenesis is comparable to a lot of the better X games Capcom made, and I can't wait to play it again. So please, give the game a try. There's a link to it in the description. I hope this is just the start of a bright future for Mega Man X fan games.